Eli worked as an invisible Omega nanny until the alpha billionaire saw his scars. Eli had learned a long time ago how to become invisible, not completely gone, not suspicious, just easy to ignore, quiet steps, lowered gaze, long sleeves, even in warm weather. At 23, he had perfected the art of taking up less space than he deserved. His body knew the rhythm of it, shoulders curved inward, footsteps that didn't echo, breathing that didn't disturb the air around him. He had been practicing since he was 16, and 7 years of survival had turned instinct into architecture. In a house as large and busy as Marcus Kane's, that kind of presence worked perfectly. No one questioned a nanny who did his job well and kept to himself. The wealthy didn't want drama from their staff. They wanted efficiency, discretion, and absolute reliability. Eli delivered all three without ever once making eye contact longer than necessary. And Eli did his job very well. He took care of Oliver, a 6-year-old alpha pup with sharp eyes and a stubborn streak that would become formidable when he grew up. The boy asked questions Eli couldn't answer and noticed things children shouldn't notice. He had already figured out that Eli never rolled up his sleeves, even when they baked cookies together and flour dusted everything in sight. Oliver was the son of Marcus Kane, one of the most powerful alpha billionaires in the city. 34 years old, self-made by 25, and ruthless in ways that made other alphas step carefully around him. Marcus was known for control, precision, and never making mistakes. His face appeared on business magazine covers with regularity. His name carried weight in boardrooms and government offices alike. He had built an empire from nothing, and everyone assumed he would die still holding every piece of it. To the outside world, this house was safe, controlled, untouchable. But Eli never believed in safety. Not really. He woke early, always before anyone else. Checked Oliver's schedule. Prepared breakfast. Packed his things for school. Made sure everything ran smoothly before the first staff member yawned their way into the kitchen. He spoke gently, moved carefully, never raised his voice. His existence was a quiet hum beneath the louder rhythms of the household. Oliver liked him quickly, which surprised the staff. Alpha pups usually tested boundaries, pushed omegas around, especially ones who didn't carry a scent. They had instincts they didn't understand yet, urges that came out as tantrums and commands and little acts of dominance that adults called cute, but omegas learned to fear. But Oliver didn't. He stayed close to Eli, watched him with curiosity instead of dominance. Sometimes he would ask simple questions, delivered with the solemn intensity of a child who had learned early that adults lied. Why do you always wear long sleeves? Why don't you smell like other omegas? Why do you look at doors like you're waiting for something bad to come through? Eli would smile, soft and calm, and redirect the conversation. He was good at that. Redirecting, avoiding, surviving. He had been doing it for years. Marcus noticed things most people didn't. He didn't interfere often. He paid people to manage the household so he didn't have to, but he observed. Observation was how he had built his company. He watched patterns, identified weaknesses, and struck when the timing was perfect. It was a skill, not a gift, and he had honed it over 2 decades of outmaneuvering people who thought they were smarter than him. He saw how Oliver followed Eli without complaint, how the boy calmed down faster around him than with any of the other staff. How Eli had never once crossed the line, never got too familiar, never assumed privileges he hadn't been given, but somehow held a quiet authority that Oliver responded to. Then he noticed something else too. The absence. No scent. No trace of omega pheromones, even at close distance. Eli moved through rooms and left nothing behind. No warmth, no signal, no biological signature that said omega here. It wasn't that his scent was faint or suppressed by blockers. It simply wasn't there. That wasn't normal. Not rare, exactly. There were medical conditions, traumatic injuries, gland damage from accidents or illness. But those were exceptions, not rules. The scentless omega usually meant something had gone wrong. Something had broken. Marcus didn't ask about it. Not yet. But he didn't ignore it either. The first real shift happened on an ordinary afternoon. Oliver had been playing, too energetic, bouncing off furniture, pretending the living room was a spaceship. He knocked over a glass of water reaching for a toy, and the entire contents spilled across the table and onto Eli's shirt. It soaked through immediately. Eli froze for half a second. Not because of the mess. He had cleaned up worse things without blinking. But because wet fabric clung, and what it clung to was not smooth. The scars on his arms pressed against the cotton like secrets trying to escape. He could feel the outline of them. Raised tissue, uneven texture, stories written in damage. He reacted quickly. "It's fine," he told Oliver, voice steady despite the way his heart had started hammering. "I'll change and be right back." He moved fast toward the guest room nearby. One of the few places he could change without going all the way back to his quarters in the staff wing. The door was unlocked. He hadn't thought to lock it, because no one ever came to this part of the house in the middle of the afternoon. He didn't lock it. He should have locked it. Eli pulled his shirt over his head, turning his back to the door out of habit. The mirror on the far wall showed him what he already knew, a map of damage across his shoulder blades, his spine, his ribs. Long thin scars from something sharp. Circular marks, darker and deeper, from something hot. Burned scars, some old, some newer but poorly healed, like whoever had inflicted them hadn't bothered with aftercare. Faint bruising along his left side. Yellowing, fading, but still visible. The kind that didn't come from a single incident. And lower, near his right shoulder blade, a mark that made even him flinch to look at. A clear imprint. Repeated, layered, deliberate. Someone had tried to control an Omega's gland area. Over and over again. Had pressed devices there, injected chemicals there, bitten there in ways that were never meant to heal cleanly. Had tried to force a bond that Eli's body had fought with everything it had. The door opened. Marcus walked in without knocking. Not unusual in his own house. He was looking for a file, something he thought had been left there earlier. His assistant had mentioned it in passing, and Marcus had simply turned left instead of right, pushed open the door, and stepped inside. He stopped the moment he crossed the threshold. Eli had his back turned, shirt halfway off, the wet fabric bunched around his elbows, exposing everything from his waist to his shoulders. For a second, neither of them moved. Then the silence shifted. Not awkward. Not confused. Something heavier. Marcus's body went still in a way that wasn't relaxation, it was focus. The kind of stillness predators had right before they decided what to do. He saw everything in one glance. The scars, the burns, the bruising, the ruined gland site. His jaw tightened. Eli reacted first. He pulled the shirt back on too fast, fingers shaking just slightly. The wet fabric clung again, but he didn't care. It was coverage, and coverage was safety. He didn't turn around immediately. He needed 1 second. Just one. To breathe. To force his face into something that wouldn't give him away. When he finally faced Marcus, his expression was calm. Too calm. Controlled in a way that didn't belong to someone caught off guard. It was the control of someone who had learned to erase himself from his own face. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I thought the room was empty." Marcus didn't respond right away. He wasn't looking at Eli's face. He was replaying what he had just seen, fitting it into patterns he knew too well from news reports and whispered stories, and the kind of research he had done for cases he didn't talk about in public. That wasn't an accident. That wasn't neglect. That wasn't a single traumatic event followed by proper medical care. That was sustained abuse. Targeted. Controlled. Someone had done that on purpose, over time, with knowledge of how Omega bodies reacted. With intention. Who did that to you? Marcus's voice was low. Steady. But there was something underneath it, something that sounded almost like restraint. Like he was holding himself back from asking other questions. Louder questions. Eli's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second. Not surprise. Not even fear. Recognition. He had heard that tone before. Not from someone like Marcus, someone powerful, someone who could ask questions and expect answers, but from someone who thought they had the right to ask. Someone who had asked in that same low, steady voice before doing things that made the scars on Eli's back look like decorations. "It's in the past," Eli said. "It doesn't affect my work." "That's not what I asked." The air shifted again. Oliver's laughter echoed faintly from down the hall, completely unaware of what was happening just a few rooms away. The sound was bright and young, and so painfully normal that Eli felt something crack inside his chest. He glanced toward the door for a moment, grounding himself. "I can still take care of Oliver," he said. "That's what matters." Marcus stepped closer. Not aggressively, not looming, but with intention. The distance between them closed enough that most Omegas would react automatically to Alpha presence. A flinch, a drop of the eyes, a subtle shift toward submission. Eli didn't. No flinch. No instinctive submission. Just stillness. That confirmed it. His gland wasn't functioning properly, or it had been damaged badly enough to suppress everything. The biological pathways that should have triggered fear responses, submission responses, omega responses, they were either broken or had been trained into silence so completely that they no longer worked. "That still doesn't answer my question," Marcus said. Eli met his gaze this time. Calm. But there was something under it. Not weakness. Something harder. "I'm not in danger anymore." That was the first lie. Marcus knew it immediately. Not because of the words, they were plausible, even reasonable, but because of how they were said. The slight pause before anymore. The way Eli's throat moved when he swallowed. The way his fingers had curled into the wet fabric of his shirt like he needed something to hold on to. Eli believed he was safe enough to function. That wasn't the same as being safe. There was a difference, and it was a dangerous one. Marcus exhaled slowly, then stepped back, not pushing further. "Not yet. Get changed," he said. "Oliver is waiting." Eli nodded once. "Yes." Marcus left the room, but he didn't go back to work. He went straight to his office, closed the door, and made a call. Short, direct. He didn't explain everything, just enough. "I need a full background check on someone named Eli. He came through the agency last month. I want medical records, previous employment, anything that was buried. And I want to know if anyone has accessed that agency's database recently from outside." He hung up before questions came. Across the house, Eli returned to Oliver as if nothing had happened. He smiled. Continue the routine. Read a story. Corrected homework. Kept everything steady. But his mind wasn't calm. It hadn't been calm since the door opened. He knew what Marcus had seen. The scars. The damage. The story written on his skin in a language no one should have to read. And more importantly, he knew what kind of man noticed things like that. What kind of man asked who instead of what happened. That night, after Oliver was asleep, Eli stood alone in his room staring at his reflection. He rolled up his sleeve slowly, exposing the faint marks that didn't fully fade even after years of healing. His hand hovered near his collar, near the place where an Omega's gland should react, should produce something. Anything. Nothing. Just silence. "I'm safe now," he whispered to himself. Barely audible. He didn't believe it. Somewhere else in the city, a different man looked at a screen filled with stolen data. A list of names. Employment records. Background checks that were supposed to be confidential. One of them was highlighted. Eli. Not his real name. Not the name this man had given him. But the face matched. The height, the build, the way the photo showed someone trying to look smaller than they were. Adrian Voss smiled slightly. "Found you." And in Marcus Kane's house, without anyone saying it out loud, something had already begun to change. The next morning looked normal on the surface. Oliver woke up early, asked for the same breakfast he always asked for, pancakes, but only the small ones, cut into triangles, complained about his schedule with the theatrical despair of a 6-year-old who had been asked to do something mildly inconvenient, and stayed close to Eli like always. Eli moved through the routine without missing a step. Calm, steady, reliable. If anyone had walked in, they would have seen exactly what they expected. A quiet Omega nanny doing his job well. Making breakfast. Packing a backpack. Tying small shoes with practiced efficiency. But Marcus wasn't looking at the surface anymore. He watched patterns. And now that he had seen the scars, everything about Eli felt different. Not suspicious. Not wrong. Just incomplete. Like a story with a missing middle. Like a book where someone had torn out the chapters between the beginning and the end. He didn't bring it up again that morning. Didn't question Eli in front of Oliver. Didn't push. Didn't show anything on his face. But the moment he stepped into his office, the call he had made the night before came back with results. The man on the other end was Derek, his head of security. Someone who had worked with him for years and knew how to find information others tried to bury. Derek didn't waste time on pleasantries. The agency he came from was compromised, Derek said. About 3 weeks ago. Someone accessed internal records. Not random, targeted searches. Your household was flagged. Marcus's expression didn't change. And Eli, Derek paused for half a second, then continued. No clean history. That's not unusual for Omegas trying to start over. New name, new city, new job. But this one is different. There are gaps. Big ones. Before 6 months ago, he doesn't exist under that name. But you found something else. Original identity likely changed. Cross-matching medical records, injury patterns, and shelter reports, I found a probable match. Name before was different, something he's not using anymore. But the records tie him to an alpha named Adrian Voss. The name meant nothing to Marcus. Not yet. Derek clarified immediately. Adrian Voss. Private investor. Quiet reputation publicly. But flagged multiple times in underground reports. Pattern of Omega ownership. Control behavior. Possible illegal bonding attempts. Nothing proven in court. Everything buried. Marcus's fingers tapped once against his desk. What kind of control? Derek didn't soften it. Physical abuse. Pheromone suppression. Isolation. Reconditioning. The kind that breaks Omega response systems. If Eli is who I think he is, he didn't just leave. He escaped. The word stayed in the room longer than the sentence. Escape. That explained the scars. The lack of scent. The way Eli didn't react to alpha presence at all. His gland hadn't just been damaged, it had been targeted repeatedly. Intentionally. Someone had tried to break something inside him, and when they couldn't break it entirely, they had settled for making it unusable. And now, Marcus asked. Derek answered immediately. There's more. The same breach that exposed your household also shows external interest. Someone is tracking the same data set. It lines up with Adrian Voss's known network. He's looking for someone. High probability it's Eli. Marcus didn't respond for a moment. Then calmly, increase internal security. No visible changes. I don't want him alarmed. And Adrian, find out how close he is. Already working on it, Derek said before the call ended. Across the house, Eli had no idea how much had already been uncovered. But he felt the shift anyway. Not in obvious ways. No alarms. No guards suddenly appearing. No one pulling him aside for questions. But small things. A door that was usually left open was now closed. A camera angle slightly adjusted. Staff moving a bit more carefully, speaking in lower voices when they thought no one was listening. It wasn't enough to confirm anything. But it was enough to trigger something in Eli that never fully turned off. Awareness. The kind you learn when you've had to survive. When you've spent years listening for footsteps, reading the moods of the people around you, noticing when the atmosphere changed before anyone said a word. His body knew before his mind did. His shoulders would tighten. His breathing would shallow. He would start cataloging exits without meaning to. Oliver tugged on his sleeve, asking him to sit and help with a drawing. Eli did, forcing his focus back. "That's good," he said gently, guiding the boy's hand. Oliver looked up at him with those sharp eyes and asked, "Why do you always look like you're listening to something far away?" Eli paused for a second, then smiled. "Just making sure everything is okay." Oliver accepted that answer easily. Children didn't question what felt safe. They absorbed the mood of the adults around them and called it reality. Eli wished he could still do that. Later that afternoon, Marcus crossed paths with Eli in a hallway. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't avoided either. They stopped just long enough to acknowledge each other. No one else was around. Marcus studied him openly this time. Not his face, his posture. His breathing. The way his weight was distributed, slightly favoring one leg, ready to move if he needed to. The way his eyes had already swept the hallway once, noting the exits, the windows, the distance to the nearest door. Eli stood straight, composed. But there was tension under it now. Subtle, but present. He felt it too. "I asked for your file," Marcus said without warning. Eli didn't react outwardly, but his eyes sharpened just slightly. "That's your right," he replied calmly. "It's incomplete. That's intentional." There was no hesitation, no attempt to deny it. That told Marcus more than any report could have. Eli wasn't hiding because he had something to be ashamed of. He was hiding because he had something to fear. "Why?" Marcus asked. Eli held his gaze. "Because some things are better left where they are." "That depends on whether they're coming back," Marcus said quietly. That landed. Eli's fingers tightened slightly at his side, almost unnoticeable. He didn't answer immediately. Then, carefully, "I handled it." Another lie. Not careless. Not weak. Controlled. But still a lie. Marcus stepped closer again. Not enough to corner him, just enough to close distance. Close enough that Eli could feel the warmth of him, could smell the clean, sharp scent of an alpha who wasn't posturing but didn't need to. "If someone is looking for you, that becomes my problem," Marcus said. "You're in my house. Around my son." Eli's voice stayed steady. "I would never let anything reach Oliver. I believe that." Marcus's tone didn't soften. But belief doesn't stop people. Silence again. Not empty. Heavy. Eli finally said, "I'm not who I was before." Marcus answered just as evenly. "The person who did that to you might not care." That was the first time something real showed on Eli's face. Not fear. Not panic. Just a flicker of something unresolved. A wound that had never fully closed because someone kept picking at the edges. Then it disappeared. "If there's a risk, I'll leave," Eli said. "No." The answer came instantly. Sharply. Eli frowned slightly, caught off guard for the first time. "You don't know what you're dealing with." "I know enough." "That's not." Eli. The sound of his own name, spoken in that low, steady voice, stopped him. Marcus wasn't arguing. He was stating. And there was something in his expression, not pity, not concern, something harder and more complicated, that made Eli's chest ache in a way he didn't have words for. "You're not leaving," Marcus said. "Not because of him." Eli shook his head slightly. "You can't protect me from everything." "I'm not trying to protect you from everything." Marcus's gaze didn't waver. "I'm trying to make sure you don't have to run anymore." That hit somewhere Eli didn't want to be hit. He looked away first. "I need to check on Oliver," he said, and moved past Marcus before he could respond. Routine resumed, but the balance had shifted. No longer invisible. No longer untouched. That night, Derek sent another update. Short. Precise. Adrian Voss confirmed active in the city. Financial movement tied to a rival firm targeting your company. This isn't random. They're connected. And one more thing. We intercepted a partial message. A name was mentioned. Marcus read the single word on the screen. Eli. He didn't react outwardly. He just closed the file, stood up, and looked out across the city lights for a moment. The skyline glittered below him, buildings he owned, companies he controlled, an empire built on decisions exactly like the one he was about to make. Whatever this was, it wasn't going to reach his house. Not his son. And not the Omega who had already survived more than he should have. Somewhere else, Adrian Voss looked at the same name and smiled. Slow. Certain. You hit well, he murmured. But not well enough. And in the quiet space between those two men, Eli continued doing what he had always done. Surviving. Unaware that this time, running might no longer be enough. By the third day, the feeling of being watched was no longer something Eli could ignore. It wasn't obvious. No one followed him in plain sight. No strange calls. No direct threats. But the pattern was there if you knew how to read it. A car that stayed parked longer than it should across the street from the staff entrance. A delivery driver who looked at the house too carefully, who lingered after handing off packages. Small disruptions that didn't belong, a gate left open that should have been closed, a security patrol that passed 5 minutes later than usual. Eli didn't say anything at first. He had learned long ago that reacting too early made things worse. It gave people information. It showed them what you were afraid of. The smart move was to wait, to watch, to gather your own data before making any decisions. But inside, something old was waking up again. Something that had never really gone away. Survival instincts didn't disappear. They just waited. Marcus noticed it too, but from a different angle. Derek's updates had become more frequent, and each one confirmed what Marcus already suspected. Adrian Voss was not just looking. He was closing in. Financial traces linked him directly to a rival firm that had been trying to pressure Marcus's company for months. It wasn't just about Eli anymore. It was leverage. If Adrian got to Eli, he would have something far more valuable than information. He would have control. And people like Adrian didn't stop once they had that. That afternoon, something small finally broke the surface. Eli was in the kitchen preparing Oliver's lunch when one of the house staff, a young beta assistant named Nina, walked in holding a package. Nina had been working in the house for about a year, responsible for deliveries and scheduling. She looked confused. This just arrived, she said, holding up a simple white box. No sender name. No return address. It was addressed to you. Eli froze for half a second. Not visibly, just a pause in the rhythm of his hands. I didn't order anything. Nina shrugged slightly. It was already cleared at the gate. Security didn't flag it. That was the first real problem. Nothing got through that gate without being checked. The security team was thorough, background checks on every delivery driver, scans of every package, protocols that had been designed by people who thought about threats the way normal people thought about traffic. If this passed inspection, it meant whoever sent it knew how the system worked. Knew what would trigger an alert and what wouldn't. Eli took the box carefully. It was light. No ticking. No weight that suggested danger. Still, his fingers were steady in a way that came from experience, not calm. He opened it slowly. Inside, a single item. A fresh white flower. And underneath it, a small card. Eli didn't need to read it to know. The handwriting was familiar before his eyes processed the shapes. Neat. Controlled. The kind of handwriting that came from someone who believed every mark they made mattered. You don't lose what belongs to you. Nina frowned. Is that a joke or something? Eli closed the box immediately. It's nothing. Probably a mistake. But his voice was quieter than usual. Nina hesitated, then nodded and left. She didn't push. People in this house knew when not to ask questions. It was part of the job description. Eli stood there for a few seconds longer, the box still in his hands. His breathing stayed even. But his mind was already moving, calculating, running through possibilities with a cold precision of someone who had done this before. He hadn't used that name. He hadn't left a trail that obvious. The agency had been clean. He had checked everything before coming here, had paid someone to check again, had taken every precaution he could afford. No paper trail. No digital footprint. No connections to the person he used to be. So how? And who? Marcus's voice cut in from behind him. What's that? Eli turned. He hadn't heard Marcus walk in. That alone told him something. He had been distracted. Unfocused. Sloppy. I don't know, Eli said. Marcus stepped closer and took the box from his hands without asking. He opened it, read the card once, and his expression didn't change. But something in his posture did. Tighter. Colder. This isn't random, Marcus said. Eli didn't answer. This is him. Marcus's voice was quieter now. That landed. No need to say the name. They both knew who him was. Eli looked away first. It doesn't mean he knows where I am. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He took out his phone and sent a quick message to Derek, presumably. Then he set the box aside. It means he's close enough to test the perimeter, Marcus said. Eli's jaw tightened slightly. Then I'll leave. No. The answer came instantly. Sharply. Just like before. Eli looked at him, frustration breaking through the calm for the first time. You don't understand how this works. He doesn't stop. He doesn't negotiate. If he knows I'm here, he will keep pushing until... Until what? Marcus cut in. Eli didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marcus stepped closer. Not aggressive, but firm. Close enough that Eli could feel the heat of him, could see the way his jaw was set, the way his hands had curled into loose fists at his sides. Running didn't stop him before, Marcus said. It won't stop him now. Eli's eyes flickered. That was true. He had run, changed his name, disappeared, and Adrian still found him. Still tracked him. Still sent flowers to houses where he wasn't supposed to exist. I won't risk Oliver, Eli said quietly. You won't. Marcus's voice was steady. Certain. Because I won't let anything reach him. There was something in his tone that made Eli pause. Not arrogance. Not empty confidence. Certainty. The kind that came from someone who had already decided the outcome before the game started. Before Eli could respond, Oliver's voice called from the other room. Eli, come see this. The moment broke. Eli turned, forcing himself back into routine, and walked out to join the boy. He could feel Marcus's gaze on his back the whole way. Marcus stayed behind for a second longer, then picked up the box again and stared at the flower. A message, a warning, or a claim. He wasn't sure which one worried him more. Derek called back within minutes. We missed it, he said immediately. The package came through a third-party vendor that's been used before. Clean records. No flags. Whoever sent it knew exactly how to bypass initial screening. Adrian. Marcus asked. Most likely. Derek's voice was tight. And there's more. We've been tracking unusual activity near the property. Not constant surveillance, but periodic checks. Someone is mapping patterns. Delivery schedules. Security rotations. Staff arrivals and departures. Marcus's gaze shifted toward the hallway where Eli had gone. He's escalating. Yes. And if he's this close, he's not just testing. He's planning. Marcus ended the call and didn't move for a moment. Then he made another decision. That evening, he called Eli into his office. No pretense this time. No routine to hide behind. Just the two of them, the door closed, the weight of everything unsaid pressing against the walls. Eli stood across from him, posture straight, expression controlled again. But there was no point pretending nothing was happening anymore. He knows, Marcus said. Eli didn't argue. I'm relocating you and Oliver temporarily, Marcus continued. Private property. No external access. Controlled staff only. Eli shook his head immediately. That's too much attention. If he's watching, moving like that confirms everything. Staying confirms it too, Marcus said. Silence. Eli exhaled slowly. You don't understand him. Then explain. Eli hesitated. Not because he didn't want to, but because saying it out loud made it real again. Made it something that existed outside his own head, where other people could see it and judge it and use it against him. He doesn't see Omegas as people, Eli said finally. He sees them as things to shape, to break and rebuild. If he thinks I'm still his, he won't stop. Not for money. Not for risk. Marcus listened without interrupting. He tried to force a bond, Eli added quietly. More than once. That explained the gland damage. The control marks. Everything. And he failed, Marcus said. Eli met his eyes. I escaped. That word again. It carried more weight than any other. Marcus nodded once. Then you don't go back. Eli almost smiled at that, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. That's not always a choice. It is now. Another silence. Longer this time. Eli could feel something shifting between them, not just the conversation, but the shape of their relationship. The roles they had been playing. The walls Eli had built. Finally, Eli said, if we move, we do it quietly. No visible security changes. No obvious routes. And Oliver doesn't know anything is wrong. Agreed, Marcus said. That was the first time they were fully aligned. Later that night, while the house slept, Derek's team began preparing the relocation. Unmarked vehicles. Rotating routes. Minimal staff involvement. Everything designed to disappear without looking like it had. Marcus had built contingency plans for situations like this, not specifically for a hunted Omega, but for threats in general. He believed in being prepared. Eli packed a single bag. Not much. He had learned not to accumulate things. Possessions were anchors, and anchors kept you from running fast enough. He stood in his room for a moment, looking at the small space he had occupied for 6 months. The bed he had slept in. The desk where he had written in a journal he would burn before he left. The mirror where he had checked his collar every morning to make sure nothing was showing. He was leaving. Again. He told himself it was different this time. That Marcus wasn't Adrian. That this move was protection, not captivity. That he wasn't running, he was being moved. It felt the same. Somewhere in the city, Adrian Voss watched another update come through on his screen. Movement patterns. Security shifts. Small changes that meant everything if you knew how to read them. His informant inside Marcus's operation wasn't high level. Just a low-tier logistics coordinator who needed money and didn't ask questions, but he didn't need high level. He needed patterns. And the patterns were changing. Preparing to run again, little Omega, Adrian murmured, tracing the edge of the screen with one finger. Or is someone running for you? His smile returned. Either way, there you are. The hunt was no longer quiet, and for the first time since he arrived in this house, Eli felt it clearly. He wasn't just being watched anymore. He was being hunted. The relocation happened before sunrise. No announcement. No visible rush. Just a quiet shift in routine that most people in the house wouldn't even notice until hours later. Derek had planned everything down to the smallest detail. 2 identical vehicles left the property at slightly different times, one carrying decoys, the other carrying Marcus, Eli, and Oliver. The drivers switched routes twice within the first 30 minutes. No direct path. No predictable pattern. It was clean, controlled, and efficient. But even with all that, Eli didn't relax for a second. He sat in the back beside Oliver, one hand resting lightly on the boy's shoulder, his eyes scanning reflections in the window, tracking movement without turning his head. He had done this before. Not like this, not with protection, not with someone else making the decisions, but with the same awareness. The same hypervigilance. The difference now was that he wasn't alone. And somehow that made it worse. Because if anything went wrong, it wouldn't just be him this time. Oliver didn't know anything was wrong. He thought they were going on a short trip, a mini vacation Marcus had called it, with a straight face that impressed Eli more than it should have. The boy asked questions, pointed at things outside, leaned against Eli like always. That normalcy made everything sharper for Eli, Because if anything went wrong, it wouldn't just be him this time. They arrived at the safe house just after dawn. It was a private coastal property owned by Marcus through a shell company that didn't have his name on any paperwork. Rarely used. Secured, but not obvious. No large staff. No heavy presence. Just a small, trusted team already in place. Derek was there in person, something he didn't usually do unless the situation was serious. He greeted Marcus with a brief nod, then looked at Eli for a moment longer, assessing him. Not as a threat, as a variable in the situation. Perimeter is clean, Derek said. We rotate patrols every 2 hours. No external access without clearance. Marcus nodded. Keep it quiet. Eli said nothing, but he registered everything. Entry points, exits, blind spots, the location of every window, every door, every potential vulnerability. It wasn't paranoia. It was habit. For a few hours, things settled into a temporary routine. Oliver explored the new place, distracted and curious. Eli stayed close, guiding him, keeping everything stable. Marcus worked remotely, but his attention wasn't fully on the screen. Every update from Derek came through immediately. Every small change was noted. The first crack came in the afternoon. Derek received a call from one of his field contacts, a man named Victor, a security contractor who handled external intel. Victor wasn't part of the household, but had access to information outside official channels. His voice on the line was tight. We have a problem. What kind? Derek asked. Adrian made a move. He took someone. One of your logistics guys, Marcus, the one who handles supply routing. Derek's expression hardened. Marcus wasn't high level, but he had enough access to patterns, enough to be useful under pressure, enough to be a bargaining chip. Where? Derek asked. Warehouse district. We lost visual after extraction, but he left a message. Derek didn't need to ask who it was for. When Marcus heard, he didn't react immediately. He listened to the details. The location. The demands, simple, direct. Eli comes alone, or Marcus dies. Then he dismissed everyone except Eli. Oliver was already occupied in another room, unaware of anything. He's not just tracking anymore, Marcus said. Eli understood immediately. He wants to draw me out. Marcus nodded. Marcus doesn't matter to him. He's leverage. Eli's jaw tightened. Then he'll escalate until he gets what he wants. And what he wants is you, Marcus said. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncertainty. It was calculation. Both of them thinking. Both of them running through options, contingencies, costs. Eli spoke first. If we do nothing, he hurts Marcus. Then he takes someone else. Maybe closer. Or he tries to breach here, Marcus added. Eli looked at him directly. He won't stop. I know. Another pause. Then Eli said it clearly, without hesitation, without the careful deflection he usually wrapped around hard truths. I'll go. Marcus's answer came instantly. No. This is about me. Eli's voice was steady but firm. He's not after your company. He's not after your son. He's after me. And that makes it my problem, Marcus replied. Eli shook his head slightly. You can't control this the way you control everything else. He doesn't think like you. Then we adapt. If I don't show up, Marcus dies. And then it keeps going. Marcus didn't look away. If you do show up, you walk into exactly what he wants. That's the point, Eli said quietly. That was when Marcus understood. Not just the plan, the mindset behind it. Eli wasn't offering. He had already decided. Before Marcus had even known there was a decision to make. You're not offering, Marcus said. You've already decided. Eli didn't deny it. I'm not running again. That hit harder than anything else he had said so far. Because Marcus could hear what was underneath it. Not courage, exactly. Not desperation. Something more complicated. A refusal to let fear make his choices for him anymore. Marcus exhaled slowly, then turned slightly, thinking. Not rejecting the idea. Adjusting it. If you go, he said finally, you don't go alone. Eli didn't respond immediately. This becomes controlled, Marcus continued. We set the location. We set the timing. We monitor everything. And if he doesn't agree, he will. Marcus's voice was cold now, not with anger, with certainty. Because he thinks he's in control. That was the key. The message came an hour later. Not directly to Eli. To Derek, through the same intercepted channels. Coordinates. Time. Simple instructions. Come alone. Eli read it once and handed it back. He expects me to follow that. You won't, Marcus said. Preparation moved fast after that. Derek coordinated. Teams set up positions around the meeting point. Mapped out sight lines, exit routes, contingencies. Snipers were placed at a distance, hidden, waiting. Communication lines were secured. Eli changed into neutral clothing. Nothing that stood out. Nothing that could be used against him. His hands were steady. Too steady. Before they left, Marcus stopped him. This is where you listen to me, Marcus said quietly. He wasn't asking. You don't react to anything he says. You don't move unless I tell you. And if something goes wrong, you get out. That's the priority. Eli met his gaze. And Marcus. We get him out too. Marcus's voice didn't soften. But not at the cost of you. Eli didn't argue. Not this time. The meeting point was an abandoned structure on the edge of the industrial zone. Open enough for visibility. Isolated enough for control. The kind of place someone like Adrian would choose, not because it was strategic, but because it made him feel powerful. Empty space. Echoing footsteps. Nowhere to hide. Eli walked in first, exactly as instructed. Alone. From Adrian's perspective. Adrian Voss was already there. He hadn't changed. Same calm posture. Same controlled expression. Like nothing had ever happened. Like time hadn't passed at all. He stood in the center of the room, hands clasped behind his back, waiting with the patience of someone who had never doubted the outcome. I knew you'd come, Adrian said. Almost pleased. Eli stopped a few feet away. Didn't answer. Adrian's eyes moved over him slowly, assessing. Taking in the changes. The differences. The ways Eli had rearranged himself into someone else. You look different, Adrian said. But still mine. Eli's hands stayed at his sides. I'm not anything of yours. Adrian smiled slightly. We'll fix that. Behind the scenes, everything was in place. Derek's voice came through Marcus's earpiece. Target confirmed. Hostages inside, restrained. We have visual. Marcus's focus didn't leave Eli. Adrian took a step closer. Lifted something from his pocket, a small device. Pheromone suppressor. Eli recognized it instantly. The shape of it. The way it fit in Adrian's palm like an extension of his hand. Let's not make this difficult, Adrian said. And in that moment, everything tightened. Because this wasn't just a meeting anymore. It was about to become a fight. Everything happened fast, but not chaotic. It followed a pattern, just not the one Adrian expected. The moment he activated the small device in his hand, the sharp chemical signal released into the air. It wasn't a scent in the normal sense. It was designed to suppress omega response and amplify alpha dominance. To force submission through biology. Through pathways that couldn't be reasoned with or argued away. Eli felt it immediately. His chest tightened. His breathing shifted. And for a split second, his body reacted the way it had been trained to react. Freeze, lower, submit. The old programming. The one Adrian had spent years installing. But it didn't complete. It stopped halfway, like something inside him refused to follow through. Like some part of his biology had been damaged beyond even the suppressor's ability to control. That hesitation was enough to change everything. Adrian noticed it too. His smile faltered, just slightly. Still resisting, he said, voice calm but edged now. You were always stubborn. He stepped closer, raising his hand toward Eli's collar, aiming directly for the gland area, like he had done before. Like this was routine. Like Eli was still the same Omega he had left behind. Eli didn't step back. He didn't drop his gaze. But his body wasn't calm. His heart was racing, muscles tight, every instinct pulling in different directions. The suppressor was working, but not completely. Something was interfering. Something he couldn't name. From a distance, Marcus saw everything through the scope line Derek's team had set. His jaw tightened as Adrian closed in. Hold, Derek's voice came through the comms. We need clear separation from the hostage. Marcus is inside the structure, tied, barely conscious, positioned just behind Adrian. One wrong shot and everything collapses. Not yet, Marcus said quietly, eyes fixed on Eli. Back on the ground, Adrian's fingers brushed against Eli's collar. That contact should have triggered immediate submission. It should have dropped Eli to his knees, should have opened every biological pathway Adrian had spent years training. Instead, Eli's hand came up. Not striking, not aggressive, but stopping Adrian's wrist mid-motion. A small movement. But it broke the pattern Adrian relied on. That doesn't work anymore, Eli said. Voice low, but steady. For the first time, Adrian's expression changed fully. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. Something that looked almost like disappointment. Everything works, he replied. You just forgot. He increased the suppressor output slightly. The pressure in the air shifted again. Eli's knees almost gave out this time. His body wanted to drop, to obey, to shut down. The old pathways were lighting up, screaming at him to submit, to survive, to do what he had always done to make the pain stop. And then something else cut through it. Not force, not dominance. Something steadier. Marcus, even at a distance, even without direct contact. Eli felt it, not a scent flooding the space, not something overpowering. Just a presence. A weight in his peripheral awareness that he had started to recognize without meaning to. Controlled. Restrained. But there. It grounded him. The reaction didn't disappear. But it didn't take over either. His breathing steadied enough for him to stay upright. Adrian saw it. He followed the shift, not physically, but instinctively. His eyes narrowed. There's another alpha, he said, slowly scanning the area without turning his head. You bonded. Not a question. Disbelief in his tone, but also interest. Something hungry. No, Eli said. Not fully, but that was enough. Adrian's focus sharpened. That's why you didn't break, he said. You replaced one with another. No. Eli's voice was quiet, but firm. I chose something different. That word, chose, didn't fit Adrian's world. His grip tightened slightly, and for the first time, aggression edged into his movements. You don't choose, he said. You respond. That's how you're built. Eli didn't argue. He just stood there, resisting in a way that wasn't loud, wasn't dramatic, but was absolute. Now, Marcus said quietly into the calm. Everything moved at once. The shot came from the left side, not aimed at Adrian, but at the device in his hand. The suppressor shattered, chemical output cutting off instantly. At the same moment, Derek's team moved in from the perimeter, fast and precise, closing the distance. Adrian reacted immediately. He grabbed Eli, pulling him sharply back, using him as a shield. A weapon appeared in his other hand, not pointed at Eli, but angled outward toward the incoming team. Stop, he said, voice cold again. Controlled. Or he gets hurt. The movement was too close. Too fast. Marcus's body reacted before his mind finished the thought. He moved forward, breaking from position, closing the gap faster than planned. Don't. Derek's voice snapped through the calm. But it was too late. Eli felt Adrian's grip tighten. felt the shift in his stance. This was the moment everything could collapse. If Adrian repositioned fully, if he got leverage again, this would turn into something else entirely. Eli made a decision. He shifted his weight, just enough not to break free, but to throw off Adrian's balance. For a fraction of a second. It wasn't strength. It was timing. Adrian adjusted instantly. But that one moment was enough. Marcus reached them. He didn't stop. Didn't slow down. He closed the distance and drove Adrian back, breaking his grip on Eli with force that wasn't calculated anymore. It was instinct. Pure alpha response, triggered by threat. Adrian stumbled, recovered, swung back. But he wasn't facing the same situation anymore. He wasn't controlling it. He was reacting. Take him, Marcus said without looking, already positioning himself between Adrian and Eli. Derek's team pulled Eli back immediately, securing him, moving him out of the direct line. The hostage, Marcus the logistics worker, was extracted at the same time, cut free and dragged out. Adrian looked at Marcus now, fully focused. "You're the one," he said, almost amused. "You think you can control this?" "I don't need to control it," Marcus replied. "I just need to end it." The fight didn't last long after that. Adrian was scaled, controlled. But he wasn't prepared for this version of Marcus. Not restrained, not negotiating, not playing by any rules Adrian understood. The gap closed quickly. A final shot rang out. Clean. Precise. Adrian Voss dropped. Silence followed. Not complete silence. There were footsteps, voices, the mechanical sounds of a team securing a scene. But the kind of silence that comes after something finishes. After something ends. Eli stood a few steps back, held steady by one of Derek's men. Breathing hard. Still upright. His eyes were on Adrian. Not in fear. Not in shock. Just watching. Marcus turned toward him slowly. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Marcus stepped closer, stopping just short of touching him. "It's over," he said. Eli didn't respond right away. He looked down at his hands, then back up. "He's not coming back," he said. Like he needed to confirm it out loud. Like saying it might make it true in a way that simply knowing it couldn't. "No," Marcus replied. "He's not." That was when Eli's shoulders dropped slightly. The tension releasing, just enough to show what had been held in place for too long. He didn't collapse. He didn't cry. He just stood there, breathing, alive, and for the first time in a long time, not running. Behind them, Derek's team secured the area, cleared the scene, handled everything that came after. The operation was clean, but none of that mattered as much as the one thing that had changed. Eli wasn't a target anymore. And whatever came next, it wouldn't be about surviving. It would be about something else entirely. The days after Adrian's death didn't feel like victory. They felt quiet. Not empty. Not cold. Just different. The kind of quiet that comes when something that has been chasing you for too long suddenly stops. When the noise in your head, the constant calculation of threat and escape, and who might be watching, finally has nowhere to go. Eli didn't know what to do with it at first. His body still reacted like the threat was there. He checked doors twice, listened for footsteps that never came, woke up at the smallest sound, a branch tapping a window, a car passing on the road outside, the house settling in the cold. But nothing followed. No messages. No signs. No flowers on doorsteps or shadows in parking lots. Adrian was gone, and this time it stayed that way. They returned to Marcus's main residence 3 days later. The transition was smooth, controlled, just like everything else Marcus handled. Staff resumed their routines. Security stayed tight but less visible. And life continued. On the surface, nothing had changed. But inside the house, the dynamic was no longer the same. Oliver ran to Eli the moment they got back, throwing his arms around him without hesitation. "You were gone too long," he said, holding on tighter than usual. Eli froze for a second, then slowly relaxed. His hand came up to rest on the boy's back. "I'm here," he said softly. That wasn't something he used to say before. It was always "I'm fine" or "don't worry" or some other deflection that meant I might not be here tomorrow. But this time, the words felt different. Heavier. More permanent. Oliver didn't question it. He just nodded and stayed close. Marcus watched that from a distance. Not interfering. Not stepping in. Just observing. The connection between them had always been there, but now it was stronger. Not just comfort, something closer to attachment. And Eli wasn't pulling away from it anymore. The real change started at night. The first time it happened, Eli didn't even realize what he was doing. He woke up suddenly, breath uneven, body tense. The edge of a nightmare still clinging to him, not the details, not the images, just the feeling. The suffocating weight of someone else's control pressing down on his chest. For a few seconds he didn't move. He waited, listened, tried to ground himself in the present. No locked doors. No footsteps. No voice telling him to stay still. Just silence. He got up anyway. He didn't think about it too much. He just moved, instinct guiding him. Down the hallway. Past the guest rooms. Past the main stairs. His bare feet were silent on the hardwood floor. And stopped in front of Marcus's door. That was the moment his mind caught up with his body. He shouldn't be here. This wasn't part of his role. This wasn't safe. This wasn't controlled. He was staff. He was a nanny. He had no right to stand outside his employer's bedroom in the middle of the night, wearing nothing but an old t-shirt and the scars Adrian had given him. He almost turned back, but the feeling didn't go away. It wasn't fear this time. It was something else. A pull. Not strong, not overwhelming, just steady. Like a thread connecting him to something he couldn't name. He knocked once. Quiet. Marcus opened the door almost immediately, like he hadn't been fully asleep. His eyes moved over Eli quickly, taking in the details. The rumpled hair, the bare feet, the way his hands were curled into loose fists at his sides. No visible injury. No immediate threat. But something was off. What happened? Marcus asked. Eli hesitated. Nothing, he said. Then, after a second, I just couldn't sleep. That wasn't the full truth. But it wasn't a lie either. Marcus stepped back slightly. Come in. Eli didn't move right away. Then he did. The room was quiet. Simple. Controlled, like everything else Marcus owned. Dark wood furniture. A bed that was too large for one person. A window that faced the city, lights glittering in the distance. Eli stayed near the door at first, not crossing too far into the space. His body was still tense, even if he didn't fully understand why. Sit, Marcus said. Not an order. Just a suggestion. Eli sat on the edge of the chair by the window. Hands resting loosely. Posture straight. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Eli said it quietly, like he wasn't sure he should. It's still there sometimes. Marcus didn't ask what it meant. The memory, Eli added. It doesn't stay gone just because he is. Marcus nodded once. That doesn't change overnight. Eli let out a small breath. I know. Another pause. Then something shifted. Eli leaned back slightly, not fully relaxed, but less rigid than before. His shoulders dropped just enough to show the difference. And without thinking too much about it, he moved just a little closer. Not enough to touch. Just enough to close the space. Marcus noticed. He didn't move forward. Didn't reach out. Just stayed there. Steady. Controlled. Is this okay? Eli asked after a moment, his voice lower now. Marcus answered simply. Yes. That was enough. Eli didn't close the distance completely. Not that night. But he stayed longer than he needed to. Long enough for his breathing to even out. Long enough for the tension in his body to settle. Long enough that when he finally stood to leave, he felt almost human again. At the door, he paused. Thank you, he said. Marcus didn't respond with words. He didn't need to. After that, it happened again. Not every night. Not always the same way. Sometimes Eli just stayed in the hallway, grounding himself before going back to his room. Sometimes he knocked. Sometimes Marcus found him already there, sitting quietly, not asking for anything, but not leaving either. Each time the distance closed a little more. One night, Eli didn't sit in the chair. He sat closer on the edge of the bed. Another night, his shoulder brushed against Marcus's arm, and he didn't pull away immediately. Another time, he fell asleep there without realizing it, waking up hours later still in the same place. No alarms. No consequences. It wasn't control. It wasn't instinct forcing him. It was choice. And that was new. During the day, things changed too. Just more subtly. Marcus stopped treating Eli like staff. Not in obvious ways, not in front of everyone, but in small decisions, including him in conversations, asking for his opinion on things that didn't involve childcare, letting him stay in rooms he didn't have to leave. Eli noticed. He didn't question it out loud, but he adjusted slowly. Oliver noticed the biggest difference. One afternoon, while Eli was helping him with a simple reading exercise, Oliver looked up and asked, "Are you staying?" Eli paused. "I work here," he said. "That's not what I asked," Oliver replied, serious in a way that didn't match his age. Eli looked at him, then answered more carefully. "I'm not leaving." Oliver nodded once, satisfied. Then, after a second, "Are you my family?" That question landed harder than anything else. Eli didn't answer immediately. He glanced toward the doorway, where Marcus was standing, watching but not interrupting. Then he looked back at Oliver. "I'm here for you," he said. It wasn't a direct answer, but it was honest. That night, when Eli stood outside Marcus's door again, he didn't hesitate as long before knocking. When the door opened, he didn't stay near the entrance this time. He stepped in, and when he sat down, it wasn't on the chair. It was closer. Not forced. Not rushed. Just closer. And for the first time, when the silence settled between them, it didn't feel like something that needed to be filled. It felt like something they both chose to stay in. By the time things finally settled, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like something steady had been built without either of them noticing exactly when it started. The house was the same. The routines were the same. But the way Eli moved through it had changed. He no longer stayed at the edges. He didn't avoid rooms or conversations. He didn't measure every step like he might need to leave at any moment. He stayed, and that choice showed in everything he did. Marcus saw it clearly, not just in the way Eli interacted with Oliver, but in the way he stopped holding himself like a guest. He spoke more directly. He stayed longer in shared spaces. He didn't flinch when their hands brushed, or when proximity closed the distance between them. The gap had been disappearing slowly. Now it was almost gone. The shift became undeniable one evening after dinner. Oliver had fallen asleep early, worn out from a long day. The house was quiet, staff already moving into their night routines. Eli stayed behind in the main room, organizing a few things. But he wasn't in a hurry. Marcus was there too, reviewing something on his tablet. But his attention wasn't fully on the screen. "You don't need to do that," Marcus said without looking up. Eli paused. "It's part of my job." "That stopped being the only reason a while ago," Marcus replied. Eli didn't answer immediately. He set the last item down, then looked at him. "Then what is the reason?" Marcus finally looked up. "You stayed." That was simple, direct, but it carried more than the words themselves. It carried weight, the weight of every night Eli had knocked on his door, every morning he had woken up still there, every small choice that had added up to something neither of them had planned. Eli held his gaze. "I chose to." "I know," Marcus said. Silence followed, but it wasn't uncertain. It was clear. Both of them understood what was being said without saying everything. Marcus set the tablet aside. "Come here," he said. "Not an order. Just something natural. Something that had been waiting to be said. Eli hesitated for a fraction of a second, then walked over. Not cautious, not guarded, just aware. When he stopped in front of Marcus, there was no distance left that mattered. Marcus didn't reach for him immediately. He gave Eli the space to decide. Eli closed it. The contact wasn't sudden. It was slow, deliberate. His hand rested lightly against Marcus's arm first, testing, grounding. There was no resistance, no control, just presence. That was enough. Marcus lifted his hand and touched Eli's face, not forcing anything, just steady. His thumb brushed along Eli's cheekbone, tracing the curve of it. Eli didn't pull back. His eyes stayed on Marcus's, clear, calm, not afraid. The kiss that followed wasn't rushed. It wasn't driven by instinct or pressure or any of the things Eli had learned to expect from touch. It was chosen. That was the difference. Eli leaned into it, not because he had to, because he wanted to. And for the first time, there was no hesitation underneath it, no voice in the back of his head asking what comes next, or how do I get out of this? Just the kiss. Just them. When they pulled back, the space between them stayed close. This is what you want? Marcus asked quietly. Yes, Eli answered. Just as steady. That was the moment everything shifted fully. The next few days didn't explode into something dramatic. There were no sudden declarations, no immediate changes in how the house operated. But the relationship between them was no longer unspoken. It was real, visible in the way they moved around each other, in the way they stood closer without thinking, in the way Eli didn't leave the room when conversation shifted into something more personal. Oliver noticed, of course. He was sitting with Eli one afternoon, drawing quietly, when he looked up and asked, "Why does Dad look at you like that?" Eli blinked, caught off guard. "Like what?" "Like you're important," Oliver said. Completely serious. Eli didn't answer right away. He glanced toward the other side of the room, where Marcus was standing, already watching them. "I think I am," Eli said finally. Oliver nodded, accepting that immediately. Then he added, "So you're staying forever?" Eli smiled slightly. "I'm staying." That answer was enough. Later that evening, after Oliver had gone to bed, Marcus called Eli into his office again. This time, there was no tension, no urgency, just purpose. "I've already adjusted your position here," Marcus said. "You're not staff anymore. Not in any official sense." Eli listened without interrupting. "You have full access," Marcus continued. "Decisions, the house, everything." Eli tilted his head slightly. "That sounds like more than a job." "It is," Marcus said. Then he stood up and stepped closer. "I'm not going to assume anything," he added. "So I'll ask directly." Eli didn't move. "Stay with me," Marcus said. It wasn't complicated. Wasn't wrapped in anything else. Just clear. Eli's answer came without hesitation. "I already am." Marcus held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded once. "Then there's one more thing. This part was different." Eli felt it immediately. Marcus's hand lifted, but stopped just short of his collar, where an Omega's gland would respond, where Adrian had tried to force a bond, where the scars were thickest. He didn't touch. "Not yet." "I won't do this unless you want it," Marcus said. "And if you say no, nothing changes." Eli understood exactly what he meant. Bonding. Not forced. Not taken. Offered. For a moment, the past tried to surface. The memory of pressure, of control, of being turned into something that didn't belong to him. The weight of Adrian's hands. The pain of devices pressed against his skin. The feeling of his own body betraying him. But it didn't take over. It didn't define this moment. Because this wasn't that. Eli stepped closer. Slowly. Deliberately. He reached up and adjusted his collar himself, exposing the space that had once been used against him. The scars were visible in the low light. the damage, the history. "I choose this," he said. That was all the permission needed. Marcus didn't rush. He moved carefully, giving Eli time to pull back if he wanted to. But Eli didn't. He stayed exactly where he was. The bond wasn't about control. It wasn't about dominance. It was about trust. When it happened, it wasn't overwhelming. Wasn't forceful. It was steady, grounding, something that connected instead of taking. A warmth that spread through Eli's chest, filling spaces he hadn't even known were empty. He didn't tense, didn't freeze. He stayed. And when it was done, he exhaled slowly, like something inside him had finally settled into place. Marcus rested his forehead briefly against Eli's, not saying anything. He didn't need to. That night, nothing dramatic followed. No sudden shift in the world outside. No new threats. Just quiet. But it was a different kind of quiet now. Not the kind that comes from fear, the hypervigilant silence of someone waiting for the other shoe to drop. The kind that comes from finally being safe. From not having to listen for footsteps anymore. From being able to breathe without measuring each breath. Eli stayed in Marcus's room that night. Not because he was afraid. Not because he needed protection. Because he wanted to. And in the morning, when he woke up with Marcus's arm draped across his waist and sunlight filtering through the curtains, he didn't feel the usual rush of panic that came from being vulnerable while unconscious. He felt something else. Something he didn't have a name for yet. But it felt like home. For the first time, Eli didn't have to tell himself he was safe. He knew it. And just like that, what began as survival became something deeper. Trust, choice, and a love that was never forced, only given. Eli was no longer running, and Marcus no longer stood alone. Together, they built something steady, something real.